bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Okay, welcome, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Today is Monday, June 19th, and tonight Dave Beaty is with us. Dave, of course, we're all familiar with Dave's work, and tonight he's a director, he's a filmmaker. He's a media specialist, but he's also a UFO and UAP investigator and researcher. Done a lot of work on the subject. I could read through his entire bio, but I won't do that. I will say this, though. It was his work on the Nimitz Encounter that caught my attention. And ever since then, I have been following every step of Dave's work and everything that he releases. He sends me stuff from time to time, too, as well. And so we're going to get straight to it tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about 29 Palms, flares, a giant triangle. We might jump into the Nimitz Encounter, and, of course, Dave Grusch, who is, as well, should I say, revealed himself as a whistleblower 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to get straight to it tonight and say, Dave, welcome back to Fade to Black. How you doing?
Jimmy, it's great to be here, man. Chaka bra, Thanks for having me on.
Dave, what we should have done, the real show, is we should have done a live stream of the last 30 minutes. That was gold. That was gold.
Sometimes you have to pray to the production gods, like, please.
Here's see the smile on my face. I don't get upset anymore. I don't. We had a technical issue, and here's the thing. I'm going to tell everybody what happened. We lost one channel. Okay. All right. So we lost one channel. Now, especially in a studio like this, but any production studio, when something like that, one channel could be any cable, right? It could be anything, anywhere, and you have to chase it down. And in this case, it was the main mix button on the console. At the end of everything, we were 10 seconds to showtime. I'm just like, okay, let me hit that. And I heard it crackle. And then boom, it was a button shorting out. And and it's just, oh man. And Dave said the funniest thing to me. He said, in this digital world, we still have analog buttons.
that was right before you're like, okay, we got to cancel tonight, Dave. Sorry, man. I can get you on in like 3 months.
It came down to that. I go, Dave, you want to do a show on Friday? I'm looking at the clock. It's like 15, 14, 13. Dave's like, I'm out of the country on Friday. And I hit that button, and boom, Dave, we're going live right now. And it's so funny. We still have analog buttons. All right, here. Okay, I'm so excited to have you back on the show. Let's get back. Okay, the last 30 minutes, we can put that behind us. The world of UFOs. And I just wish you'd go back to UFOs, by the way, and let's get rid of UAPs. It doesn't grab people's attention. You say UFOs, right? People understand exactly what you're talking about. But if you are a historian, a student of history, especially about the subject of UFOs like I am and like you are, the struggles that we are going through today they've been repeating themselves for 70, 80 years, right? We're literally on wash, rinse, repeat. But this time around, it feels a little bit different to me, young man, in that we've got everybody involved. We've got the media, we've got Washington, we've got the Department of Defense, we've got all the intelligence agencies and that entire community involved. Now we've got whistleblowers and hearings, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then Grusch surfaces 2 weeks ago. Have you ever seen it like this?
No, I mean, usually this topic area, it's like one of those things where it's a desert. You're talking about a case from like 10 years ago, and you're still talking about that case like every other day and beating it like a dead horse. Now there's so much coming down the pipeline that we don't have enough time to talk about all these different things. What's tomorrow going to bring? I mean, really, it's like there's so much that, hey, if you have the time to research all this stuff and figure it all out, then you can intelligently maybe hold a conversation. But again, I mean, I'm trying to catch up just like everybody else, really.
Now, there's Grusch. So much has been unpacked. If we just get straight to the chase, there's two things, and then there's one result. But it's flying saucers and aliens, right? That's what that's the two takeaways. We've got the craft, we've got the bodies on ice. Maybe some are still alive. I don't know about that part. But this kind of throws things in a whole nother direction too as well. And you're right. Unpacking all of that it's insanity. Did you expect a whistleblower to come forward and say that we have intact alien craft and bodies on ice?
Well, I can just say straight up that I lost $200 because I bet one of my friends online on Twitter there that, no one was going to be coming forward that was a government employee claiming that there was crash retrieval programs and so on. This rumor has been going on for a long time, specifically within the UFO community. And I've always been sort of a skeptic of it. And so I felt pretty good odds that I could bet a couple $100. At least I didn't lose $1,000, which I was kicking around a little bit, but that would have hurt way more. So as long as this guy turns out to be legitimate and his story continues to check out, or else I'm going to get my $200 back. So that's kind of what I did not expect that at all, for sure. It was a total surprise.
Now, there is, we've got so much to discuss tonight, but going back to Grusch, the statements that he has made, and we have to, of course, huge props to Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal, and of course, Ross Coulthart with the interview that he did too as well. And you take a look at all of that, and you realize, especially with the questions that have been answered, is that he has passed on, I don't know if it was through his attorney or directly, but he has passed on classified documents that have convinced him that we have intact alien, let's just say flying saucers, right? We've got flying saucers and we've got ET on ice. It appears that the same information has been given to Congress and caught their attention too, and immediately hearings are being called for from Capitol Hill. This is the Capitol Hill. It's not us yelling for it. What do you think could possibly be in those classified documents for the IG and for Congress?
I mean, listening to what David Grusch has said specifically is that he went to the intelligence community inspector general and presented them with this classified information, including the program name and where the material is and the people that he says that he independently corroborated from several of his long-term intelligence community allies that he had known he said most of his career, and presented that proof, as he said, to the Inspector General. And I guess he's also given briefings to, the intelligence, the select intelligence committee's attorneys. So what he's basically saying is he's provided them with this information, although he can't review it himself. Sorry, Jimmy, hold on. My camera must have just clicked out.
That is the best. That was awesome. That was awesome. Yeah, we have to just cap off the evening, right?
Well, I have a Canon, and it must, I don't know, it must just all of a sudden decide that it's going to go to sleep or something. So make sure I don't.
Okay. So you mentioned the word location. Are we at the point where enough is enough? Let's start naming names. Corporations, who's working on this stuff, the SAP programs, and quit dilly-dallying, and let's just now start getting to specifics. If there was a classified document that has the location, Lockheed Skunk Works, for instance, right? It's down the street from my house. Is that what you think was in these documents?
I think so. I mean, he said that his contacts that began briefing him and telling him about the program specifically were mentioning defense contractors. So he didn't want to go into any information about that in the interviews that I saw. But he said that the U.S. government has indeed engaged with some of these defense contractors with this material to allow them to, not only look at it, but probably as a methodology to keep this stuff secure in these special access programs out of the purview of other DoD entities.
Before, BG, before Grusch, right? So BG, we would look at this this material, little pieces of. It's not like we had the pilot's seat, let alone an intact craft, right? We've always looked at little shavings or metals or drippings or metamaterial, but now he is taking things to a completely another level, where he is saying intact craft. What contractor beside? Well, it's at Lockheed Skunk Works. Who would we expect to have this in their possession?
That would be my number one go-to, right? You could look at maybe like Raytheon as well, but I think that people just kind of say, Lockheed. And, to your point, the other thing that I noticed in the last several years was this effort, specifically, Tom DeLonge, his company was involved in collecting all of this publicly held material, paying upwards of like $35,000 or something like that for arts parts. And I'm sorry, my camera keeps doing that. I just have to hit it, Jimmy, but it's like one of these things, Yeah. But anyways, So what do we make of that? I'm not really sure what to say.
Yeah, you're referring to arts parts.
Yeah. So when you look at the number of pieces of metal and so on that were recovered by the public, this stuff was all sort of grabbed up and put into an army crata, I guess that's what they call it. And that stuff was taken, and I don't know that, I think it's classified now. I think that Gary Nolan even said that material has been labeled classified, and the people that have provided that in the general public are not getting it back. They had to sign NDAs and so on. So that's where all that material that was out there in the public, and most of it's gone now.
What's your read on Grusch? We've read the article, we've heard him speak, we've watched him. How do you feel? What's your take on not only his statements, but his believability, his body language? because of the statements that he has made. When you look at his CV, right? You look at his resume, you look at his decorations, he has a solid background, and everything can and has been checked out on him.
Right.
So what's your read? Is there a reason for him to deceive, or is it all disinformation, or is he telling the truth and we really need to pay attention?
I mean, I personally think that he believes what he's saying. I mean, and that's just a take of listening to the guy and watching him speak and so on. I honestly do believe that he believes this stuff. So either the information that he was provided, since he said he personally didn't see the craft himself, wasn't given access to these programs. He's taking the word of these individuals that he say brought the information to him. So he's a secondhand witness, but you have to either say, okay, either the material that he was provided is a, true and honest reporting of that program, or that is some type of counterintelligence operation that has another reason for being in existence. And, again, it would just be speculation to say, well, what possible reason could the intelligence community want to present this story to the public, really, like this, if it's a false narrative? And I mean, somebody suggested, well, this could be a way to try to find out who's leaking the information. If we come out and tell people that within the, in the intelligence community in a classified setting, if we tell people that these programs exist, that maybe they don't, it's just kind of like they're dangling a carrot there. And then they try to observe who would go and leak it to the press, or who would go and tell somebody about this program. And then it kind of ferrets out those people that maybe, a security risk. So, I mean, that could be one reason, but it's kind of a weird way of going about it. And you wouldn't expect the Inspector General to even take that report if that's the case. I mean, if he went to an official channel like the Intelligence Community Inspector General and made a report that there was illegal, I mean, he's not leaking it. He's saying this is an illegal activity. That's kind of what his claim was. So
there's another part to this. The documents are one thing. Do you think that he provided images, video?
From what I understood, that he provided, and again, I'm a little bit unclear if some of the people, the firsthand individuals that actually were participants in these programs have given testimony. I'm not certain that has occurred. He said in his interviews, he alluded to the fact that he may have been shown documents. He may have been shown some unusual photos. So what does that mean? I mean, he's skirting around this information, what he actually saw. So I don't think that he had in his possession anything that he could give himself to the Inspector General or in his, testimony. But maybe some of the people that he was provided this information in the first place have testified. I'm not sure.
Do you? Okay, one last thing, and then we'll move on. I mean, just exciting times, right? You just never know with the UFO community. I've said it so many times, Dave. You have been through it right along with us. Just when you think things are quieting down, right? It's just like that, boom, and it never surprises me anymore. You just never know what's going to happen. You don't. And it seems like for the first time, we are getting somewhere and people are paying attention, right? It's just, what can we expect next?
I mean, here's the crazy thing. We've had some UFO stories that got picked up national media attention, CBS 60 Minutes. We've had like the New York Times and Washington Post. In this case, they seem to be keeping a little distance from it, which is kind of strange to me. But I mean, I guess it's such a bombshell story. Maybe they don't want to touch it in case it blows up, and it's like one of these things where we're just going to wait until we have a little bit clearer understanding that this is true. And this guy's not delusional or being fed lies before we report on just what he's saying. But I mean, when you listen to it right off, he's saying, yes, we have proof that there is non-human intelligence. We've had it. It's been hidden from the U.S. populace for 90 years, is what he said. And he said that's unethical. I mean, yeah, we've had people claim this before. We have Bob Lazar, and we've had these people that have come forward, but never people of his caliber that have 14 years of decorated career in the intelligence and Air Force communities with combat veteran. I mean, I don't know that we have that, plus somebody that has gone under oath and given testimony under oath that could potentially cost him, criminal charges, I guess, if you lie under oath and so on,
Right.
perjury and all kinds of things for doing so. So I don't know that we've ever had a story like this. I mean, it's pretty exciting.
You almost went there. Here's the trippy thing. Tucker Carlson, right after Grusch came forward, I think it was like 2 days later, on his Twitter channel, he goes live and he makes this statement, and he says, here we have the biggest news, potentially, right? The biggest news in the history of mankind. Flying saucers, ET contact, right? We have ET bodies. And no mainstream media is picking up the story. He mentions the debrief, right? He says it took the debrief he said, but go look at the New York Times, go look at the Washington Post, go look at CNN, go look at Fox, and see if they've got this on their front page. And they don't. And this is the biggest story potentially in the history of the world. But yet, the 29 Palms flares, I might have gotten ahead of my skis, but that certainly got headline news, didn't it? The Las Vegas 10-foot aliens in the backyard, right? That everybody picked up on that story. Grusch, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, Ross Coulthart on the back burner. Why?
Isn't that really startling? I mean, I started doing some Google searches, and people should do that about some of these cases and saying, and again, maybe this stuff is going to get picked up, but obviously at the time the story broke, it wasn't like, you had normally what you would have is the mainstream media picking these stories right up and kind of respinning them with their own reporters and so on. It gets picked up by the wire services sometimes and then spun out again. You didn't really see that with Grusch. I know, like you said, that, Fox News did pick it up, Tucker. But I even wondered about CNN. Somebody said that CNN did finally do a report on the Grusch story.
Kind of squashed it, though. And it took a week.
Right. So, yeah. And then, of course, like you said, if you're scrolling through your CNN, you're like, 10-foot alien in Las Vegas, why is that? I guess that's sort of a kicker feature piece or something. So then, the weird news, and they like those stories, but the ones that seem to be more troubling and more, I don't know what you would call it, but, top U.S. defense officials says that we have recovered alien spaceships doesn't get played. It's weird. I'm not sure.
Can we talk about 29 Palms?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's talk about 29 Palms. My comment. Okay, I just want to say this. If we go back 2 years ago to the flying pyramids, right? Flying toasters, whatever. And if that indeed was a flying pyramid, that would have been the biggest news in the history of mankind. Obviously, it had landing lights, but that story just died and fell off because it wasn't flying pyramids. Number one. Number two, now we have from the same source a triangle over 29 Palms. And for the audience that may not understand, 29 Palms is it's a marine training base facility, one of the largest in the world, and it's right out here in Southern California in the middle of the Mojave Desert. And 29 Palms is a city It's a marine city. That's what it is, right? And it's out in the middle of nowhere, and that's where this video that got put out was shot. That huge news. And when you started to analyze the video, and you've sent me some stuff, by the way, what was your immediate thought?
Well, when that story first broke, when I looked at the imagery, it was photographs that were at night, and there were a few that were low light camera type of shots in the sky. I didn't see initially there wasn't like video. I think a little bit of video was released after that, but it was a string of lights in the sky. And I mean, the first thing that I thought was, oh, that looks like parachute flares. And I had done a analysis video previously of an alleged UAP that turned out to be parachute flares that was filmed in Afghanistan, and it looked similar to me. So that was the first thing, and I didn't listen to the whole story behind it until later. And then basically the story that was presented was that this object wasn't flares because it wasn't descending as flares do in the air. It was hovering stationary in this spot for over 10 minutes. And the first thing I did is I looked up parachute flares to see if that's possible. And it's not really possible. I mean, parachute flares are not stationary, and they don't last for like 10 minutes unless there's some new classified version that we're not aware of. Maybe half of that and in half of that time, and then these things are going to slowly descend down. And if they're far away, they may not appear to be descending very quickly because with distance, that relative movement's going to be way less. And then they said that the people that were on the ground, there were two other parts of it, that they saw an outline of this giant black triangle clearly with their eyes. That the camera didn't really pick it up as much, but they said that they could see the outline of a triangle. And they said that soon thereafter, the witnesses, and there were like 50 witnesses allegedly that were at Camp Wilson watching it. They saw that the Marines, that the Marine Air basically took off and were trying to go and intercept this thing, or trying to go investigate what these lights were. And that went on for several hours. So they, suggested that the Marine Corps had a response to this anomalous object that was in the sky. So that was the initial story that came out. And that's what was basically printed in a bunch of news media like the next day or that week.
And the incident itself was 2 years ago.
That's right. It was April 20th, 4/20. I always remember that. And it was 4/20, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. in the evening. So it probably was, quite dark at that point, I imagine. And what happened was the next day, I mean, I started to look into it, but John Greenwald of the Black Vault beat me to it. And he went over to the Defense Visual Information Library, where combat cameraman and public affairs personnel will post photos that they take of different operations. And we quickly found, and John Greenwald quickly found, that there was a lot of imagery from that very night. And it turns out that on that night, in the week preceding it, that the Marine Corps were involved. The Marine Corps was involved in a joint training exercise, or an integrated defense exercise, an IDX, that involved Marine Air and ground troops. And it's called the WTI, and I think it's called the WTI 421 course. And basically what that is, it's part of a weapons and tactics instructor course. They do it every single year at maybe 3 or 4 Marine Corps bases around the country. And it involves bringing in the Marine Air training element. And they already have one there at 29 Palms. So it's helicopters, heavy lift, the Ospreys, and they conduct air assaults, and they also do heavy lift, and they're practicing their techniques. They're shooting live weaponry and so on. And right around that night, they were involved in a night air assault on one of the staging bases that they have in the desert there. So the helicopters were bringing in Marines, they were landing, they were doing a mock assault on a village, they were getting back on the helicopters. So during this exact time, all of this was going on. And John located a video that I shared with you that showed some night vision footage of the helicopters and the Marines. And at the very end, you see them launching flares. And it looks suspiciously like the same arrangement of lights that we saw from this story. And John basically brought up the fact that, wait a second, how come no one mentioned this huge major military operation going on at that very night, let alone, that week or in the days before? Did anyone like say anything about that? I mean, I'm just a little skeptical when you have that level of, I guess, not mentioning something in a report. I don't know.
Well, 2 years of investigation, and for you and John, it was took about 20 minutes, and that's suspect to me. But when I looked at the images, okay, the original images that were put out, first off, they don't even look like a structure. And Dave, I depend on my eyes. I do. I just depend on what am I seeing? What am I looking at? And I can base pretty much everything on a first glance. And that is not a structure. That is not a perfect, you know what I mean? It's not. Everything's out of line. It doesn't look right. So even trying to deceive, but with it, if it was in a perfect straight line, we've got some issues, and let's take a look at that. Right. One clearly is falling faster and is out of place, and it's got smoke coming off of it, and I could see it. You can see it and it's like cognitive dissonance, right? Nobody wants to have proof of something that's going to take them out of their lane. Right. Yeah. They don't want to see it. So they don't see it. They look at the same image that I'm looking at, but that they don't, their brain is wired differently. Why did everybody take the bait on this?
I mean, I understand that witnesses sometimes see something they don't understand, or it's something that they're not used to seeing. And even if you're a trained U.S. Marine, member that has lots of experience with flares, there's always the case where something happens that's unusual. For instance, say an aircraft has a bunch of flares that they're doing something else and they go up to a high altitude and kick them out. So they're not necessarily illuminating the ground. Maybe they just wanted to go up and practice shooting flares, for instance. Sometimes they use these balloon launch flares as targets for other aircraft like A-10. They were in the other video I did. The A-10s were locking up these flares with their infrared guided missiles. So it's a target that they can lock on with a guided missile. Who knows? Maybe they went up really high, 10,000 feet, and they were dropping them. So it would be more unusual to see the flares at a high altitude, and you're just not used to seeing it. So there's always that. I mean, for the guys on the ground, I can't say that, they're obviously lying. I'm thinking, when I look at a UFO case, oftentimes the witnesses on the ground are convinced that they're seeing ET. I mean, most of the time they don't want to hear anything that refutes that, unfortunately. So you're faced with kind of like this, kickback from the witnesses that the minute you try to say that, man, that looks kind of like a flare, they're going to hang up on you or not talk to you anymore because you're not the investigator that they want investigating, that's going to explain this. So, I mean, what I did is I basically went to the Marines. Well, the first thing I did is I went to the photographer that took the imagery that John found, and I showed you. You can find that on the Defense Visual Information Library from that day. Basically, it was B-roll, video B-roll. And I talked to the guy, and he said, look, I can't really talk to you because, we're not supposed to talk about operations or whatever, but here's the name of my first lieutenant in our shop. over at 29 Palms. So I just went and filed a FOIA with the Marines, and unfortunately, the Public Affairs Office got back to me and said they were kind of swamped with requests, but they were going to delay it until July. But I'm hoping that by providing them with the photographs that were in the report of the triangle and, you know, some of this other information, that they can say, oh yeah, that was so-and-so. And those are flares that, you know, this pilot was kicking out of his plane on that day at that exact time. It has to be that. I mean, that's what I'm expecting to happen, but I mean, it's not guaranteed.
Here's the thing. All right. This is where I just call it out. With all of the resources that were in play at that moment, if there was a black triangle craft, not of this earth, above 29 Palms, all of the weaponry that could have been brought down to bear on that is one thing. Everything was there, right? All of the offensive capabilities, all of the sensor data, all of the radar information, all of the FLIR footage, all of the cell phone cameras, all of the sensor, it's 29 Palms, right? We would have images of this thing from every single angle, and we don't have any of that.
There's 9,000 people. I looked it up. There's 9,000 people that live on the base. I mean, plus, you know, for that one operation,
Right.
the WTI, weapons tactics instruction, there were probably hundreds and hundreds of Marines, if not thousands, that were all awake that night because they were involved in this training operation, flying aircraft probably in that same vicinity. I didn't, you know, correlate exactly where the lights were, and trying to figure out which range the helicopters were flying around. But, you know, they could have easily flown over there and taken a look if someone got on the radio and said, hey, there's another unauthorized aircraft over the base. You know, we better go check it out. I mean, maybe there was, and that's what happened. I don't know, but I think it might be flares. And there's a lot of, I would say, pro UFO people that I kind of communicate with, and most of them even said, yeah, that's probably flares. I mean, they're like, we're moving on from that case, you know, like.
Yeah, it's now here's the wacky part. Okay. I've had a few crazy sightings in that area in Joshua Tree. 29 Palms is about 20 miles away from Joshua Tree if you're going up the freeway there. So, you know, it's a 20-minute drive. Okay. Depending on how fast you're driving. I've had Giant Rock is out there, right? And it is, for a lot of reasons, the center of the UFO universe, right? And so much Van Tassel, the original UFO conventions, 10, 15,000 people, all went down out there for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of sightings. And I've had my own. And one night, Dave, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I see this. I'm with a couple hundred people. I see this green, it's called green chrome ball. I watched this thing go across we all did, go across maybe quarter mile off of the ground, and maybe for a couple of miles, and then turn and go up. Just a green ball. I don't know, 50 feet, 100 feet. I don't know how big it was. And just turn. It took about 5 minutes. It went like this, and then turned up, and then went straight up, turned into a star, and then flew away.
Whoa.
Now, my comment after watching that go down, and we're all screaming and hooting and hollering and laser, we all see it in video, and it's all out there. But I then said, 29 Palms is right there. Where are the Marines? Right? Aren't they concerned that something like this just, you know, flew across the desert floor? Now, or does this happen every single day and they don't react to it? Now I sound like a paradox, a hypocritical paradox of my own self, right? Where I see that, and that was my reaction. Could it be that maybe there was a black triangle over 29 Palms during military exercises, but it happens all the time and they just don't give a crap? Because that was my reaction. It's strange, isn't it? I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're right. I mean, and believe me, I'm not trying to say that there are no UFOs or that's my stance or anything like that. I truly believe that there are anomalous UFOs out there, and there's many credible stories, specifically in that part of the United States. It's probably very dark out there in the desert, and if you're going to see a light, it's going to stick out. You're going to remember it, specifically if it moves in ways that conventional aircraft don't maneuver, making turns and bopping around and so on. The color of the light, I mean, green balls of light are not normally seen. And most of us probably don't have an opportunity to have like low light pollution or no light pollution from the cities, where we're looking up at the stars and we see all kinds of lights that are most likely airplanes and satellites out there. Something that's truly anomalous might stick out. Now, what is the, what are the military going to do if there's a military base? Maybe it didn't show up on radar, maybe they weren't aware of it. If there's something anomalous in the middle of a Marine Corps air base that's like a giant triangle, I don't know. You think that they would do something about it? I mean,
you would think. Like I said, I said it out loud. 29 Palms is right there. We're the Marines. Yeah, and that's not the only. I've had sightings out there. I've seen some crazy things in Joshua Tree, and it's always just kind of blown my mind. If you're aware of 29 Palms and you're a UFO research, you're a sky watcher, right? And you're out there doing your thing, and you got your friends, you got your cooler, you got your sandwiches, and playing your music, and you got your beach chairs folded out, right? Your night vision and lasers, and you're out there having a good time. You see something, you're well aware that right there is 29 Palms. And 29 Palms, the Marine base, it's not small, folks. This is a major, huge chunk of land with a lot of Marines on it that are doing nothing but training all day long. The lights are on. They've got, you brought up the point. They've got their own Air Force out there, right? They've got their own airstrip. They've got, all of the tanks and armored vehicles and Ospreys and everything is sitting right there. But yet all this UFO activity is happening 20 miles away. It's very strange, Dave.
It's pretty strange. Yeah. I mean, again, we're talking about this one case that, may or may not be a UFO. And I'm sure that there's probably tons of stories. If you could sit down with some of these guys that are out there at all hours of the night training in the desert, they've probably seen all kinds of unusual lights in the sky. And I'm sure that if you looked into it, I'm sort of curious about it. But I also like the stories where it's a UFO that then, you can actually figure it out. And at least it's one you could check off and say, nah, that's not a UFO. And I mean, that feeling that you get by using sort of empirical science and critical thinking, you can cross off things. So you can help people understand that sometimes what you perceive as a UFO, and you are 100% certain that is definitely not a prosaic misidentification, like say somebody on the ground, a Marine looking at these lights, then it's proven it is. And you have to get over that barrier and say, I was wrong. I knew that was something unusual, but I'm going to change my mind. And now when I look at the sky and look at stars, I'm going to be a little more skeptical and say, is there any possible way that I was wrong about what I saw? Even my buddy and, somebody that's like, standing next to me sees the same thing, and they tell me, yeah, that's definitely not a plane. And you kind of like feed off each other, but being willing to admit that, okay, I hear what you're saying, and the authorities above me are telling me that those were flares. I'm going to change my mind, and then maybe I'll just be a better observer going forward.
Well, and that's also part of the issue, is that I see flares right? I'm looking at the image and I know exactly what I'm looking at. And then you've got somebody yelling in your ear, no, it's ET. No, it's not. It's flares. No, it is not. It is. No. It's like somebody trying to convince you that you're looking at a yellow car when you're looking at a red car, right? And dude, the car is red. No, it's not. It's yellow. I'm looking at it. You know what I mean? It's crazy, but people still seem to take the bait.
You know, group dynamics are something that are very interesting. And, you know, a study in psychology about crime scenes and stuff. I kind of remember some of that in college where they would talk about what people see and how they react. And especially if you were in the group of people like a bunch of young Marines, I can imagine that if suddenly somebody starts yelling, man, that dude, that's ET or whatever, you know, everyone jumps on that. And suddenly, you know, everyone's seeing a triangle, and then you become convinced because the group you're with is convinced together. It's a very powerful, motivating behavior that could convince you of something that if you were by yourself, or if somebody you were with somebody that's like, no, man, those are flares. You know, I've seen that before. And then you kind of go that direction. So, you know, I totally hear what you're saying, and you can get convinced of something if other people are telling you that. And that's, if you listen to the audio and some of those recordings that were released in the initial report back in May, you can hear that in the background, the guys, you know, the Marines kind of yelling that it's ET, man, you know, like, yeah.
The whole thing is bizarre. And then with you've got Grusch, you've got this 29 Palms flares thing, and then suddenly out of nowhere we've got Las Vegas and 10-foot aliens and the body cam footage. The news is involved. This gets picked up, and this story has not gone away. I'm okay. Oh man, I can't believe I'm going to ask you this. What do you think? You think we got 10-foot aliens running around in backyards in Las Vegas?
You know, I'm not going to like give you an opinion on that. I mean, when I saw that story, first of all, I was like, oh God, that's just one of those stories. It's hopefully it'll go away fast. You know, Mick West, one of the uber skeptics that's on Twitter, quickly, you know, said that was, you know, the green light, that's definitely a meteor or something. I mean, I just said there's no possible way that that's a real story. So I just kind of like have ignored it. Unfortunately, you know, it's not necessarily my job to investigate UFOs. So I kind of pick and choose. And that was one, hey man, I'm going to look at the David Grusch story. I'm going to look at the 29 Palms and like really do a deep dive. So don't ask me about that. Cause you know, unless somebody else comes along and says, you really need to read this story and look at the pictures, the police body cam footage and so on. I'm not convinced.
The media is, no, I should say, let me say it like this. The media is convinced on clicks now.
Yeah.
They know UFOs, ET, and it's going to get you clicks. It's going to increase your revenue. It's never been like this before, has it? I
mean, the media didn't like to do stories about UFOs in general, specifically because, I mean, they did like those kind of end of the show, at least in TV, kicker stories that were tongue in cheek. And, you know, they would play a story like the Las Vegas 10-foot alien, and then they would make a joke on the set after the story, you know, ended, and they would end the news on that on a lighthearted note. But there really hasn't been too much reporting seriously on UFOs. And we've seen some of that taking it sort of seriously when you have a 14-year career intelligence operative coming forward with these stories. They're kind of forced to do a serious take on it versus that tongue-in-cheek story or the skeptical debunk that we sometimes see as well, where it's basically a story that's slanted in a way by the reporter that basically makes you say, okay, this is probably something that we're not going to want to believe. I think you see a lot of that too. I mean, I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen, if it's going to be, some journalists taking that debunker sort of look at these cases, even though they're really there's not enough to go on at this point. You can't really debunk it yet. Or if it's going to be kind of a neutral approach where they're presenting the evidence as the debrief did. And I got to give them credit. Tim McMillan, did look at the report that Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean did and said, like, we probably shouldn't use witnesses that are anonymous sources. And he said later that there were some that they took out. There were some pretty credible sounding testimony from anonymous sources that just because these people were not named, that they didn't use it in the end. So I think that there's both. You have like this tongue-in-cheek reporting in the media. You have the debunking of it. Julian Barnes, New York Times, has often taken that approach to UAP stories. And then you have the kind of balanced, not taking a side and just presenting the evidence. I hope that that's the kind of reporting. That's what I want to see.
The news that we've had over about a 7-day period when it comes to ET contact and UFOs, Dr. Greer, Stephen Greer, did a press thing, a conference. I don't know if you can call it a press conference, how you would classify it, from the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., a week after David Grusch came forward. And again, it just like capped off an already crazy week. You had 29 Palms going on. You've got Las Vegas. It's breaking news. You've got David Grusch and Dr. Greer. That's a lot of stuff to take in a 7-day period.
It really is. And again, so you have, all of these people that are coming forward. And I guess, Dr. Stephen Greer is also presenting military, as he calls military whistleblowers, like he did, years ago. He did a similar disclosure project event where he brought in these military personnel that were telling very, very interesting stories about firsthand experiences that they witnessed. I don't know. When people get into secret underground bases, in Dulce, New Mexico, and so on, I'm a little skeptical of that. I mean, we've heard those stories before. I just don't know. I just don't know if that's true. I mean, it would be hard to hide that along with the secret underground hangars in area S4 that Bob Lazar talked about, but who knows? I mean, maybe there's some truth to it. I'm not sure, but it's certainly interesting that we have all of these military personnel coming forward. I just listened to a very, very unique individual named Mario Woods that was a U.S. Air Force security officer in the 1970s that had a startling encounter at a nuclear weapons storage area. Or actually, it was a Minuteman II launch facility. This was also featured in a History Channel show several years back, and he has given some really, really pretty interesting testimony. I think that he also spoke to the AARO office recently and provided some of his testimony to them as well. So,
what's his background?
He was obviously enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, and after going through training and so on, he was assigned as a military security specialist at a nuclear launch facility. I think it was, forget which base it was. It wasn't mine. It must have been like Ellsworth, or I forget the actual nuclear missile base that he was assigned to. But what his story is that during the night, it was in the winter, during the night that he was on duty, you know, he would be assigned with a team. There would be a team leader. He'd have a partner, and they would have to respond to alerts. And what happened was he saw some lights from kind of the base shack where they stayed in the distance, and they were acting unusual to him. He flashed some security perimeter lights, and this object flashed back at him. And he thought that was very unusual. Maybe it was a helicopter or some other aircraft that saw their lights and was kind of responding in a similar way. Soon thereafter, there was an alert at one of the launch facilities, which was a ways away from where they were. They had to get in their truck and go to this location. And according to Mario, when him and his partner arrived in their truck, they at the gated facility where the actual missiles are underground, they saw this giant spherical craft like hovering over the launch facility. So it's a really startling explanation of what he saw. And he kind of goes in detail in his account, step by step, through what he witnessed. He said that it almost felt like all of the air was evacuated from the vehicle. Like during this time when he saw this object, that his partner almost went into some type of catatonic state where he couldn't talk to the guy. He wouldn't respond. So they're sitting there trying to figure out what they're going to do and what the protocol is when you're faced with such a enormous object and not really, you know, unsure of what to do. So what happened was there was like a missing time element where suddenly he became, he woke up again, and they were in a completely different location in the truck than where they were a second ago. And he describes kind of like coming to, so to speak, and he realized that they were at that launch facility around 1 a.m. and now it's around 6 a.m. in the morning. And they had, I forget how many miles the truck had traveled. So it's a classic sort of UFO, you know, I don't know if I would call it abduction, but that's kind of what it sounds like to me, where something happened in between those 2 points, man. So
missing time. Yeah.
Missing time. Yeah. So that's the story. And the radio's crackling, you know, what's your location, you know, unit, whatever. They didn't know where they were. And they eventually were debriefed and the whole thing where, I mean, the guy was lucky his career wasn't ruined by literally, he had to explain what they saw and what happened. And I don't know that he felt that they took him seriously or not, like his commanding officers, but he did go and have to explain and sign a report and NDA and the whole thing about what he experienced. So.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of his story, and I've talked to some people about it too as well. I think, was there some regression involved? It was more like a Close Encounters of a Third Kind situation where I think he made contact, right? Let me,
you know, there was the partner that he was with. Basically, he only saw him one more time after that event, and he had some questions. So, and then, like, at least in the interview that I listened to last week that was released, he said that the guy disappeared. That he's actually asking the audience to say, "Do you know where this gentleman is? I've been trying to track him down for, 30 years or 40 years or whatever since this event," and he just kind of disappeared.
The partner that wouldn't respond.
Yeah, the guy in the truck with him. And I don't know if there was regression. I mean, there was suggestions that, like, for instance, the partner, the last time he spoke with him, said, "I remember your glove on a steel deck or a steel floor, a shiny steel floor." And he couldn't figure that out because where they were in the truck was like an F-150 that didn't have that, but he went and looked in his bag, and indeed, like, his glove was missing. So
yeah, very strange. Somebody just popped up a comment here. And where'd it go? Oh yeah, right here. He also saw beings walking towards his truck, 3 of them.
That's right. And he said that again, this stuff, a lot of it is classic, Bud Hopkins, Fowler, Whitley Strieber style reports of UFO abductions. And he saw like 3, I guess he described them what you might consider gray aliens with a super tall being behind them. And he went on to say that he recognized that the small ones had like a rod-shaped thing in their belts. Like he said that we had like a belt with a rod-shaped device with a glowing ball on the end of it. And that the taller being, he said that it had in the middle of its chest a device that was glowing with the same light. So that was like one of the last things that he remembered, I guess, before the truck disappeared or like he passed out or something. And he said that in his debriefing with his commanding officers at the squadron wing level, he never mentioned that to them. He said that he went pretty far with describing the sighting, but he felt that if he went and told them all about that would be the end, and that he would never, they would ship him off to Antarctica or something.
I was going to bring, check this out. Hold on. Look what I just wrote, Antarctica right there. I just wrote it. Okay, you know what? I got to take a break. Let's get the break in. When we come back, you sent me some notes. All right. And in your notes, you say, without any information, you say giant triangle. Don't say anything. I want to know why that's in the notes because there's nothing. It just says giant triangle. I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that Dave is working on. We'll do all of that with Dave Beaty when we come back after this break. Dave, get ready for that question when we come back. This is Fade to Black. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023 as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. With live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long, featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. Also introducing our Disclosure Fest VR Starship area with dozens of rides. You've got to check it out. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org. The secret is out. LifeWave's X39 is the reason why I have got my vision back. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you need to go straight to healingworksnow.com. That's healingworksnow.com. Works with an X. All of the information that you need is on that portal. Find out why I look great. I feel great. I'm thinking clearly. I sleep. I dream. Life is good. All of it. You've got to check out LifeWave's X39 and all of their other products. It's all simple to do. Go to healingworksnow.com. That's healingworksnow.com. Works with an X.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023. the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests, shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's going to be a night to remember. You don't want to forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I want to see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Dave Beaty. And we've got lots of things that we've been talking about tonight. So much going on with the UFO community. And Dave, you sent notes, and I looked at the notes, and there's a comma separating 29 Palms and Giant Triangle UFO. Were those the same things, or is there a giant triangle UFO that I don't know about?
No, that was a great way to keep the audience to stay tuned. But yeah, I mean, that's the giant triangle. In fact, when I tell people to look for it and search for it, if you Google giant black triangle, that's the story that pops up. So, okay,
there you go. All right. I thought that I missed something. My nerves, right, can only handle so much. These last 14 days have been insane. And I wanted to mention something. I know that you've been working on a film about consciousness for a while now, and we've talked about it before, and I would like to talk more about that. But there's a weird connection here, and that's with Antarctica. At Dr. Greer's conference, one of his witnesses that he brought forward was a contractor for Raytheon. And he said he spent 1 year in Antarctica and worked at a facility down there that created a high energy beam. Now, a few takeaways from this. All right. First off, this is Antarctica. Why would Raytheon build this huge facility? He showed photographs of it. All right. Okay. Here's the trip. He said, well, there was connections with earthquakes, but maybe we'll circle back to that. He said that this beam that could be created, bringing up neutrinos, that it was faster than light. Okay, now absorb that, and that it could project out faster than the speed of light. Possibly, now, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's a communication tool that is faster than the speed of light. And that is a pretty crazy story if true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of that. Obviously, when you have people that are coming forward with these stories, it's all really in how credible they are. Obviously, something that's faster than the speed of light. a physicist would have to discuss that, because really in quantum mechanics, right, there are some instances of spooky action at a distance and paired photons and so on, right? That's where you're talking about instantaneous types of communications. What were they using the beam for, and why Antarctica?
Yeah, it was, again, his presentation, Dave, was cut short.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to say he spoke for about 5 minutes or so. Yeah. 10 minutes is, and revealing this, the way that he did it was in bullet point fashion. Right. So it wasn't like he broke down all, and there was a bunch of technical information where we could extract stuff from. It was very quick and to the point. Now, he did have a photograph of the outside of the facility. I think he had a basic blueprint of the levels underground. It looked like it was 4 or 5 different layers, maybe 7 underground. He said that there was, again, I'd have to go back and watch, but the number sticks out. I think he said that there were 800 individual cells, right? And they would be energized and focused and projected out. Now, he did mention neutrinos, which, those are particles that we've been looking for, that they pass through the Earth, right? They're so small and so fast, but they are theorized to be faster than the speed of light. And so I think his understanding was this was a communication device. Now, he said that they fired this thing up while he was there twice. Both times that they fired it up, there was a major earthquake somewhere on Earth. Like some major earthquake in Indonesia at the instant that they turned this thing on.
That sounds absolutely fascinating. And when I conceive of what technology is being developed, what are we talking, like 40 years into the future with some of the classified black projects? And specifically, if we go back to what David Grusch was saying, that the U.S. has acquired specific technical vehicles and materials, you might suspect that if this has been going on for 80 years, that there is technology that was developed as a direct offshoot of that may not look anything like where it came from. So, a specific type of communication, a device that's being deployed, maybe there is a possibility for something like that would in some ways, be faster than the speed of light by using some type of technology that's so advanced that even, our modern physicists today haven't conceived of it.
Well, and the reason why I bring all of this up is if I was a betting man, all right, and I had some spare dosh, I would bet in Vegas that the answer to all of this is entanglement and consciousness. That's it. That's the communication tool. That consciousness is probably, it's my guess, not physical, right? It's not created. It's not a part of the physical. It is outside of the physical. And that this is another dimension, and it is a way to communicate in an instant across the vastness of space. You can't wait for the speed of light as a communication tool. If you're 10,000 light years away from your home planet, there's got to be something else going on. And you've been working on this directly. And I think that would be the answer. I think ET steps off the craft and goes, no, it's not lasers. No, it's here. It's consciousness, and that's how we talk. That's how we operate. That's how we live. That's how we fly. I think that consciousness and entanglement are the answers.
Yeah. So to your question about the film, I have been working on a project with several partners currently. Dr. Robert Davis, as you've spoken with in the past.
He's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's a brilliant scientist, academic, and he's very interested in discussing the nature of consciousness. And he approached me to see if I would be interested in exploring this. He hadn't really done films before and didn't know how you start and so on. And, you know, I explained to him the process. And in a lot of cases, if you don't have a sponsor, it's going to be a passion project. And that's what our film is today. You can look at you can look at my film at the, it's called consciousnessfilm.info, just for a brief explanation of what we're trying to accomplish. But in a nutshell, when I first heard about his ideas, I kind of had to do a quick primer myself and where theorists are today with this idea of consciousness. And I was quickly startled that, like in medicine, the scientific community often holds to rigid theories and ideals that have been instilled in, you know, the teaching and psychology and neuroscience, for instance. So when you talk about consciousness, what you find out that every student in med school is going to be taught that consciousness is it arises from a process within our brains. That's what they teach, that it's a electrochemical process that our brains create. Now, you know, in an empirical science discussion, it's going to be difficult to kind of argue with a scientist against that for, you know, one way or the other. But what you find there are some people out there, there's some philosophy, you know, there's some scientists that have kind of bucked that conception of consciousness arising from the brain. And one of the ideas is that consciousness, as you said, is more of a primary force, so that you might say that consciousness exists and that everything physically emerges from consciousness. If it's a primary force, then you could have that as some type of field that perhaps our physical reality is emerging from a type of field of consciousness, maybe a higher dimensional field of consciousness. And you might then start thinking that the brain actually is more of a filter. So if there's a consciousness field, that our brains might be tuning into that field, almost like a television set's tuning into a specific frequency of consciousness. Perhaps that tuning in is like basically tuning into our perception as an identity or our personalities, so that our experience in the physical reality is part of consciousness, but we're only aware of a very small portion of that. And then you can get in, if you begin to look at that, then you can start looking at the evidence that exists that might suggest that consciousness exists and that there's other realms of existence. There's other dimensional realms of existence beyond the physical earth and us. You might conceive that we exist outside of physical reality as well. We're just not aware of it while we're in our waking lives. And so in the film, we're trying to go in and explore some of these excellent topic areas within that study. For instance, near-death experience, where people have been pronounced clinically deceased, sometimes for short amounts of times, or their brains are not functioning at all. They have flatlined brain activity, yet they have remarkable experiences, sometimes even more vivid and memorable than their waking lives. And a lot of people that have these experiences come back and it changes their lives, and they oftentimes report what they experienced. So is that's a subjective experience of what might be a higher level of experience or higher level of dimension that's outside of physical reality. So when you hear these stories, it's very enlightening, actually. So that's one aspect of the film that we're trying to do. Another would be, for instance, some of the academic study into the field of parapsychology and ESP, for instance, extrasensory perception. And over many decades, there have been programs that have looked at these various aspects that sort of defy physical explanation or scientific explanation. And your viewers are very well aware, I'm sure, and listeners, of the study of remote viewing and telekinesis, for instance, and people that have been studied scientifically and way beyond the possibility of just being random chance. When you're doing a scientific double-blind experiment, you can provide statistical analysis that just defies this being a random effect. And it's pretty remarkable. So that's another aspect of the film that we're hoping to include. And then a third aspect might be this non-human intelligence. David Grusch talks about non-human intelligence and the possibility that there could be, it may not be extraterrestrial, that this intelligence and this technology that he says the U.S. has acquired could have arisen from some higher order dimension that we're just not aware of. So that's also a very fascinating aspect to this. So we're trying to also speak to individuals that have had these experiences that they say that they've been either directly in communication with or have had close proximity to non-human intelligence. And that's sort of the idea of the film. And we've been working on it for about 2 years now. We are sort of self-funded. So if you can help us out, again, look at my webpage and you can help us get to the next step. We're just basically funding travel. That's the most expensive stuff. And we've right now, I think we have maybe half a dozen great interviews. We went to the Monroe Institute last year. And, while we were there, we met some scientists that were conducting basically empirical research on people that have the ability to heal people remotely. I mean, basically healing through intention, energy medicine, affecting the positive health and outcome of their patients. Some of these individuals that were there training are licensed physicians, surgeons, emergency room physicians, and trauma specialists, for instance. And they're training on this because they see this as a very positive effort that could influence the outcomes of their patients. And it's not intrusive. Obviously, it's something that they can practice in their medicine, and the patients may not even be aware of it. There was one doctor I was talking to that says that she's practicing traditional medicine, family medicine, textbook style treatments and so on, but she's also using these techniques. And it's very interesting that she's deploying that. Hey, if she can heal her patients as a healer without even putting her, like laying your hands on somebody, it's very fascinating. So that's another aspect of what we were doing. We spent the day with Dr. Alexander Eben, I got it backwards, Dr. Eben Alexander, who had a profound near-death experience. And he was a staunch empirical science advocate that kind of changed his mind about the nature of consciousness and reality. After he had this experience, that he then came back from that near-death experience and began promoting the idea that death is not the end, that our lives and our consciousness and so on continue after we pass on. And it's become his life's mission to help promote this idea that there is hope. And in some ways, the film that Bob Davis brought to me and the one that we're doing, in some ways, that's part of what I'm trying to do, is to create this story and narrative line that lets people know that, look, it's sort of woo. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about subjects that are a little bit of woo in there, but it's also going to provide people with some hope, specifically that if you have loved ones that you care about that maybe have passed on, maybe you will see them again. And these individuals that have had these experiences say that that's true. They say that they have met individuals that during their experience that have passed on, their loved ones, for instance. And really, that's if they're correct, and that's where we're kind of headed, that all of the people that are involved in our lives that are close to us in our family that we lose, maybe we will see them again. I lost my mom, 92 years old, last year. I'm hopeful, and I know that she believed that was the case. And I told her before she passed, I said, Mom, if that's true, then help me get this film made.
Here's the dangerous part, and we're going to continue this conversation, but here's the dangerous part. I don't know if we need to prove this. I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea. Hear me out. Hear me out. I mean, if you want proof of another dimension, just go to sleep and dream. I'm pretty sure, I'm convinced that is another world that you're entering. All right. I truly believe that. But if we prove that there is an afterlife that's wonderful, right? Everything, unicorns. If we prove that, then anybody that has something funky go wrong with their day, just goes, screw it. Screw it. I'm just going to go to the next. I'm going to go. I don't know if we want to. I don't know if we want to prove that, because then it says that what we're doing now, this physical world that we're in, isn't as cool as what's coming next, right? And
yeah,
you know what and I don't want to use language here because it's disturbing, but you know where I'm going with this, right? And
yeah,
do we are some things just best left to a question mark?
Well, I mean, let's ask some of the people that have had these experiences, or the experts that have been studying this for 40, 50 years. Some of the doctors that have, Bruce Grayson, for instance, that have studying individuals and cases and developing sort of protocols for understanding what these individuals are reporting back. Maybe that there is something much more profound to the reason we're here, and that even if we became aware of much more about, say, our eternal selves, the validity of who we are, that we are eternal, that suicide, for instance, is not something that's going to help you, because it's sort of like a feedback cycle in essence. You can't get out of graduation. You have to complete what you're doing here. It's an agreement that you may not be aware of while you're awake. And maybe when you're having a dream, you are aware of some of this stuff, but it's possible that's part of it. I think it is. I mean, I think that I have experience with that in my life, in my family. And how do I feel about it? I don't know. I mean, I'm not like, is that the reason that happened? That somebody felt that they became aware of this kind of camouflage system of this environment that we exist in here is camouflage to a much higher order existence, and consciousness is, a projection. And so that, it doesn't matter. We can just like, in a video game, you can go back to that start point again or whatever and start over if you're not happy with where you are. I don't know I mean, I hear what you're saying, and it's possible that somebody could have that belief system if they became aware. But I think that the topic is really fascinating. And so I don't think that we're providing an answer necessarily in the film that we're doing. We're exploring the subject matter through the lens of these experts that have spent their whole lives specifically in one area or other of the study, whether it's neuroscience, whether it's somebody that's studying people that have had close encounters with UAP, for instance, and the physical effects of that, whether it's somebody that's studying parapsychology, and kind of putting that together and then letting the viewers come to their own conclusions by presenting this information to them. Do I think that we will become aware of some of this stuff? I really do. I think that that's another paradigm, maybe shift in our collective understanding of the nature of our reality as time goes on. Maybe AI will help us with this as we move forward to understand the true nature of consciousness. Are there other dimensions? Are there non-human intelligence visiting our planet that are not coming from other star systems? Are they coming from some higher order dimension? That David Grusch, I mean, that's part of what the guy is saying. I mean, people say, oh yeah, we have a crashed UFO, but he's suggesting, he says it's a theory, and he doesn't, I don't think he's saying that we have proof of this, but he's saying that there's a theory that there could be a higher dimensional order of existence, and these technologies may be emerging from that, and it's somehow co-located, his words, with us in this physical reality.
Right.
So is consciousness also, is that where that's coming from? It's pretty interesting thought.
It is. And if you take all of that, and before, I love the word woo, and I'm glad you threw that in there, because here's the hard science part of it. When we get into quantum physics and quantum mechanics and some of these basic theories and the laws of physics, where now we are told by a physicist with a straight face, right? Straight face. You can change the state of something by just looking at it. It's like, wait, what would you just say? Right? How you don't believe in ghosts, right? You have issues with consciousness, but you're telling me I can change something by looking at it. And it's like they want it both ways. To suggest that entanglement is a part of not only the laws of physics, right? To have two particles across the universe, right, reacting at the exact same time to each other. Now we're getting into some full-on woo, but like you were saying, healing somebody without touching them, it's exactly what the physicists are trying to tell us. Communicating and life after death and telekinesis, all of this is exactly what the physicists are trying to convince us of anyway, right?
It's pretty fascinating. When you look at some of the physicists that are involved in the space of, say, parapsychology, and you really take a deep dive into it, there's some very interesting, what I would call science-based ideals. And, Tom Campbell is one such scientist. His book called My Big Toe, or Theory of Everything, goes into it with thousands of pages of well thought out, logically paced information that might suggest that some of this stuff in quantum mechanics we're going to figure out plays a lot more role in who we are in our consciousness than we've ever conceived of. That the ideas of waves and particles and so on could be, because everything is fields. If you get it down to those levels of quantum mechanics, there's space between everything. It's not solid, and there's electromagnetic fields and so on. Again, I'm not a physicist, but it's still fascinating to me to hear some of these guys' ideas. And we hope to talk to Tom this year. So that's another thing. So we're trying to bring in the science aspects of the woo. and even though I know that there's a lot of skeptics out there that don't even want anyone to like present this type of information, the minute you start talking about parapsychology, it's just, you know, they throw up their hands. They don't want to hear about it. So I'm sure that, you know, there'll be those critics out there of this material, but I still think it's fascinating in putting it together in a way that is cohesive, that looks at all these different experts and specifically trying to maintain that balance, to saying, you know, there's the subjective side of it, witnesses that report the idea of near-death experience, practitioners that are saying that they have developed techniques to travel outside of their body by going into a meditative state, that they can, you know, repeatedly exit their physical body while maintaining waking consciousness, and that they can emerge from their physical body and go to locations that have roadmaps. Now, this is stuff that I've learned that is, you know, it's subjective, but they're basically saying that they can go to the same locations outside of their physical body each time they conduct these out-of-body experiences, basically. And that they've kind of created roadmaps of these places, and they teach it to other people. So other people in groups can experience it. And these groups of people all report, yeah, like I've reached this other level and I experienced the same thing you were telling me that I would experience, which is very interesting, because science is going to look at that as woo, that these people are delusional and they're just basically making this stuff up. But, you know, it's pretty compelling when you listen to the stories. And I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware of it. You know, it is out there. And if you're interested in this, these spaces of, you know, parapsychology and ESP and so on, a lot of people read a lot of books and they know about OBE and NDE and psi and all of this stuff. But there's quite a bit of people I talk to all the time that not only, you know, they don't know anything about it, they're kind of skeptical right off the bat. So maybe hearing from some experts and some experiencers that will provide firsthand subjective descriptions of their own experiences will be very enlightening for people, for sure.
The part about this that I'm so fascinated with is that if these experiences, and we can talk about DMT, and we can talk about you know, parallel world, and you know, physics will talk about the multiverse and extra dimensions and string theory, and then OBE and NDEs. You're absolutely right. I think that we're all we need one more word in the English language. We don't have that word yet, because I think that, if you know what I mean, it's all the same thing, right? It's all, right. And we just don't have a word for it, because the ability to do anything outside of the physical, no matter what it may be, channeling, communication, healing, the dream state, whatever it is, it's all the same thing. We just don't have the right word for it yet. So we trying to communicate the idea, we don't have that word yet.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, to me, it's like the eternal question: what is the meaning of life? I mean, that's kind of this right. Film that we're doing. We're basically saying, okay, we are born on this planet, and we try to live our lives effectively based on our communities and our society, and we try to do good. And we're all striving to, like, say, well, is this really all it is, that we just kind of, you know, became aware in our mother's womb, and then we were born, and then we have our lives, and then we die, and that's it? That's kind of what we're told. Although religions try to give us some hope, it's still like those are pretty ancient ideas that go back to archaic times. Oftentimes, you know, not all, but like, you know, a lot of it's very difficult to comprehend and apply to our modern lives. I think that there's going to be a convergence of technology and what I might call spiritualism. And some of these scientists are also talk about that, you know. Maybe it's spiritual technology. I don't know, but it's where's the bridge between,
right.
And then are we ready to make that bridge and take that next step to have a discovery that would be profoundly, human, but also take us maybe to the next level of understanding of existence? I think that those answers are out there. Look at the, Copernican revolution and so on, becoming aware of the planetary motion and how it worked. Before that, we had no idea, and it was right in front of us. We just couldn't conceive of it. Maybe those types of discoveries will occur. And I think it might be in these fields, this subject area of what might be called non-human intelligence. Hopefully, these experts or military and government officials that claim that this stuff really exists, that's going to help us lead us to that next stop. Becoming aware of, how science is getting closer to creating a bridge, and where do these connections between who we are and consciousness and so on exist. Maybe it's the next generation, maybe it's the next generation after that. I'm not sure.
Physicists, scientists, so pragmatic and black and white, right? Atheist, non-spiritual, most of them, not all, but we can put most of them in one box. And I get that. I understand. It's chemistry and it's a physical world.
Yeah, objective science, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But Brian Greene, in his latest book, the last chapter, so he breaks down, check this out. Now, we're talking about Brian Greene. Okay. Brian Greene, not, no, Brian Greene. And he says this, Dave. He says he breaks down the status of everything times 10 in years. So, boom, our planet is 4.5 billion years old, right? So times 10, right? And then times 10. When you push the universe out, the age, to these huge numbers, right? So now let's go to 100 trillion years from now. That's a long, when you consider we're at 13.8 billion years, right? So 100 trillion years in the future. Well, in like a trillion years, everything is going to come apart. Okay, it's going to come apart. Gravity, things, energy is going to run out. But he says 100 trillion years in the future, there's no particles. There's nothing left. It's all gone. The only thing left, and these are his words, is thought. That's right. Thought. Thinking. That's the energy of the universe. That's all. Now, and that's his roundabout way, and it's a heavy consideration, right? Just ponder that. But it's his way in the scientific method of discussing consciousness. But he can't use that word in his book. You know what I mean? So it's very strange. And he says thought needs energy to think. This is his words. And he says, so you have these clouds of thought roaming space, looking for little last particles of energy that are shooting by and go and gobble it up. Right? Some random photon. It's just, and because thought still needs energy in an energyless vacuum, right, to exist and to still think. But that's all that will be left at the end of time.
Wow.
Yeah, heavy, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, what's the next chapter? Okay. Where do you go? Well, I mean, maybe it's the opposite, because perhaps that's where it all started, and as well. It went just the opposite direction, because you could say that entropy means the slow degradation of every single thing. and that consciousness may be a process, an evolutionary process that tries to reduce entropy, and that's what we're doing. We're continually trying to reduce entropy to keep systems from falling apart into degradation. Will it eventually end up, every single particles separates into nothing but thought? Maybe so. I'm not sure in that time frame.
It's pretty amazing where and it's like a cycle. I like the way you deduce that, because that's exactly where I was at the end of the book. I've read the book so many times now. I can't tell you. Just flip it over and start over.
Send me a link to that. I definitely want to read that one.
It's Until the End of Time. It's an amazing book. Anyway, so it's like this cyclical situation, right? Where everything comes, but if all that is left is all of the knowledge and the thinking of everything that ever was, and then it all starts over again, right? And that is the consciousness that we're talking about, and how it exists in the non-physical form,
right?
And then planets, stars are, and then here we are.
Right. I mean, if you have like an unbounded oneness, as Tom Campbell describes as sort of that primary consciousness that basically would be thought, and then within that you have eddies or disturbances within those fields that over time are developed. And I mean, in some ways you could say that those are individual universes, really, or individual dimensions that could exist concurrently. And, I mean, if that is true, then one complete system could cease to exist and then reform and create another system. So it's so complex, it's hard to wrap your brain around it, that's for sure. And you do have to read some of these scientists that are writing, Green and Campbell, for instance. You're going to have to read this stuff several times. I find myself contemplating what they're saying and having to digest it just to understand what the ramifications are, because it's so enormous. And you have to then start to try to say, can I even begin to accept this in my worldview, in my spirituality, that this could possibly be true, that this stuff exists. It's on such a higher level. It's I mean, it's fascinating. And that's what I'm doing, with this film. It's like, I'm starting from, the starting gate, going, look, I'm not a scientist. And I don't know that much about the study of consciousness. Whereas Bob Davis has a lot more experience discussing this and understanding it and trying to get up to speed. So that's like a really fun part of this project. And then in addition to that, what a humbling experience, and what a blessing it is for me to be able to speak to some of these individuals that have spent their lives contemplating this, and then being able to share that with the audience is like going to be like super special to do, and I can't wait to share some of this stuff.
What have you excuse me, right at the wrong time, right? What have you learned, though? And it's a basic question when I ask something like that. What do you think comes first, right? Consciousness or chemistry? Which right? We're at like the chicken or the egg situation here. Which came first?
I mean, that's kind of the problem that material science has when you go back to the very, very beginning. And I think the terminology might be called objective causality. And it's a conundrum in the sense that science can go back to that very beginning, but then they have to go into subjective ideals to explain what happened before that, right? Like if the nature of physical reality. You have to go, what happened before that, and then you're in the realm of religion and beliefs of what happened, because you can't predict that at that point. You can't go beyond that. In some ways, if you flip it around and then go into a primary consciousness model, where consciousness is the first energy field, and then physical reality merges from that, it does in some ways, as I understand it, begin to answer some of those questions so that you can go before the first manifestation of physical matter and reality.
But it is 4.5, not even 4.5 billion years for us on Earth. If we listen to, somebody that's educated with letters after their name that I don't possess, we've got about 2 billion years of evolution time on this planet. We had to cool down. It was lava. It was molten. No oxygen and all that stuff. No water. But it's 2 billion years, long enough for this magic to happen, for you and I to talk about souls and consciousness and the micro and the macro like we are, right? We're talking about particles, and we're talking about the expanse of the universe in a conversation. And so we've evolved that quickly in 2 billion years. I don't think it's long enough. I think that the answer is the opposite, that consciousness was here already.
I mean, it seems like my entire life have looked at the nature of, what we know in physical science in the earth and biology and these systems, that it is incredibly advanced technology. Is it, you might say, like in human computer simulation, that we're creating simulated realities, and you could say that this is some type of creation. I agree with that. I mean, I think that biological entities are super complex technology that we're now put in a position where we are beginning to understand it ourselves. So it's like we are the creation, and we're looking at it, trying to reverse engineer the technology ourselves. In the beginning, we weren't able to do that, or it was like, in all those billions of years, how many steps we had to take to be able to develop instrumentation and the science discoveries and breakthroughs that allowed us to understand one piece of it. There's so much more we don't understand about, even ourselves, nature, and reality, is way, way beyond that. But I mean, I have to say that this must have existed a lot longer than we've been around, and that, somebody had a hand in it for sure. So.
Is that spiritual, or is it the Brian Greene physics side of it, of thought, and that's where creation came from? I mean, if you really look at it, we're out of time, but we're talking about time. Forever and infinite, right? That's a long time. That's a big number, right? And it's bigger than the number that we're talking about for our own universe of 13.8 billion years. Our sun is 4.5 billion years old, but infinite and going back before the Big Bang existence. And if you go with what Brian Greene is talking about, 100 trillion years, these are ginormous numbers. And that explains more about the magic of our creation, that this has evolved over infinite time, not 13.8 billion years or 2 billion years. That's not long enough for the evolution of us being so sentient.
Yeah, that's true. And also the systems that are so perfected. I mean, just in individual cellular structure, in the way that our different limbic systems in our endocrine in our brain and all the different physical things have to come together to work in harmony. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I know that's why, you know, doctors become doctors and so on, because you could study that for your whole life. It's another problem with this topic in general is that, I mean, I've spent the last 2 years just trying to get a basic understanding of what are some of these subject areas and how you can sort of refine it into a way that people can even understand. I mean, honest to God, I mean, you know, you start talking about consciousness, people like they kind of like, you know, roll their eyes and like, oh God, you know, like, do we really want to have this conversation? Because no one really is on the same page on it. It's like just a word, and it just seems almost like an enigma, really. How can you discuss it?
They can't measure it. They can't touch it. They can't feel it. Therefore, right, they're not going to spend time thinking about it, but they know that they can think about it. It's like, wait a minute. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's
just
true.
Because, yeah. Just because you can't measure it. What a fascinating show tonight, Dave. And I can't wait for the film to come out. Just keep doing your thing. And again, thank you so much. And this whole night, think about the first 30 minutes before the show tonight. And what ended up happening, just a perfect night on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, I don't know if you noticed that my camera, I have a Canon that just kept like, you know, shutting off because of, I guess it must have a heat sensor or something. So I was like reaching up, and finally I just put my Mac on because I know that would keep working. But I mean, really, I'm like, what if the camera just died in the middle of the show or whatever? So,
well, I've got news for you. The Mac has got a better lens than the Canon. I'd sell the Canon. Shoot all your movies on your Mac from now on. Just take the laptop around and shoot with that. Dave Beaty, you're the absolute best, my friend. Thank you so much. Perfect night on the show. Perfect night on the show. And thank you, Dave. And I want to remind everybody about what's going on tomorrow. Check this out. There's a new movie out. It is called, and I've seen it, it's called A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. Tomorrow night, I have the co-producer and director, Brett Eichenberger, is with us tomorrow night. So if you want to check out the film, it's called A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, tomorrow night. That's what's happening on Fade to Black. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dave Beaty. What a perfect show tonight. And let's just get straight to it so I can get out of here. Fade to Black is produced by Hill J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Very special thanks to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, I want you to be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.